We are now in the stage where we need to do some routering. We have drawn our line around the panel, 600 by 300 by 13. We now need to start routering. Let's click on the routering icon down here. It says trim. Click on that. Click on the medium size one, which says vertical trimming. And now we're ready to go. It'll ask us for a start point and an end point. We're lucky we've already drawn a geometric shape around this board. We've got a start and end point, which is this circle with a cross. If we click on this arrow here, click on the start point, it gives us a start point. Click on the end arrow, and naturally it just goes right around, so we drew that line in one continuous line right around the board. Now we can see that the green represents our router cutter, the line represents where we're cutting to on the board, and we know that the router cutter is on the correct side. We've got to make sure it's not on the other side. If we change this one to left, you can see the router cutter's on the other side of the line. We need it to be on the right hand side, so we click on the right hand side. Over here, the green arrow shows us which way the router is going to go, forwards or backwards. So now we've got a tick for forwards, which means anti-clockwise to the router. We now have this icon here. If I click on that square there, if we come back, if I unclick that square and click it on again, you can see that we've got a ramping effect, how our router is going to come into that board. It's coming down on the angle. It takes a lot of stress off the cutter, and it also keeps the cutter sharp, because it doesn't go straight down like your plunge routers or your hand plunge router. So that's our fly in. It's going to fly down into the board and then start going along that arrow there. See, it's going anti-clockwise. The Z-axis on our first cut, I've got to explain to you that we're going to do a thing called an onion skin. Onion skinning means the same as what an onion looks like. An onion is made up of layer upon layer. With the cutter on the router, it will vary or move off the line 0.3 of a mil. So it'll go in and out. So it's going in and out, zigzagging 0.3 of a mil. Even though the router head is half a ton in weight, it will still vary in its line capacity. So what we need to do is stay away from the line on the first cut. So we stay away from the line 0.3 of a millimetre, and we keep above the board, or the very bottom of the board, where it meets the spoil board, 0.8 of a millimetre. So in this Z axis here, we need to change the height to 0.8. So 0.8, 0.8, you can just write 0.8. Now the next one here, the dotted line says how far away from the line are we going to start our first cut. It's generally rule of the thumb, it is 0.3 of a millimetre away from the board. So that gives us our depth above the bottom of the board. So where your melamine or your veneer finishes, that's where the cutter's going to go down to. And 0.3 means it's going to be 0.3 of a millimetre away from the line. We'll come over to this side here where we can see 128. 128 represents the cutter. And if I click on this three dots here in the square box, it tells us what cutters we have in our router at the moment. 128 is the plywood cutter. 129 is our 9.5 compression cutter. We're going to be using the 129, so we can click on 129 or enter it as 129 in here, in this box here. Compression cutter means that the cutter will cut up at the bottom and cut down at the top, so we've got a clean top and bottom edge. The next one here is the feed rate. We can have that unticked and we can set our feed rate in here. It's generally rule of the thumb that we'd run our machine at 5 metres per minute. That's how many metres that we set here. If it's a small cutter, like a 3mm cutter, we'd probably run that at about 2 and not so deep. Now the very last thing we have to set up is the approach clearance. Now we set that at the same as the over here as our distance away from the board, 0.3. So even though the router comes down, I'll click on that one there, even though the router comes down here, it also comes from the outside down 0.3 away. So it's actually coming out and then down. That's what the 0.3 represents. So that's why we've got 0.3. So what we've got now is we've got a line going right around the board, cutting the first cut at 0.8 above the board, 0.3 away from the line, and is using the 129 cutter, 5 meters per minute, and we're coming in from the approach angle. Now we need to do another cut to go down below the board and up against the line. All we have to do is press the vertical trimming button, this one. We've got exactly the same. Now we've got the vertical trim here. Now we're on our second one with exactly the same input as we did on the first one. All we have to change now is this, the depth to minus, don't forget minus 0.2. Make sure you point the minus point as well, and this one means we're going to go right up against the line. We'll still keep the cutter and the speed and the distance away from the line for our approach distance. 0.2 or minus 0.2 means that our cutter is going to go into our spoil board 0.2 of a millimetre. When we clean up that board, our cutter will cut 0.3 into the board, so we're going to be left with a smooth board afterwards. So that's how we've done our onion skinning on our first panel.